When I began writing my dissertation, the advice that my advisor gave me was to write 5 pages per day. And that just seemed absolutely insurmountable. And they also didn't tell me how it was that I was supposed to go about that. What do I write about? What about the amount of time that research takes? And so I went searching for other pieces of advice. I looked all over YouTube, I read all of the manuals, I purchased a bunch of books about dissertation writing, and found that many of the strategies, while helpful, were often geared towards fiction writers or social scientists. And so I decided to get a little crafty and come up with a writing strategy that would work for me. And in today's video, I'm going to go ahead and share that with you. If you're new here, my name is Kaelyn. I am a 5th-year PhD candidate in History and African American Studies at Yale University. I'm currently living in London and working on my dissertation. And in the 11 years between community college and my graduate studies, I will say that I have tried and tested many a writing routine, many an outlining practice, and have developed several strategies in order for me to get writing, and also how to get unstuck when I'm struggling with writing. If you've been following me for a while, then you've probably watched my dissertation diaries series, where I have been cataloging all of my experience as I've been working on this dissertation. And there have been some high highs and some very low lows. If you've been following, you know that the writing process has been incredibly difficult. And so in today's video, I'm going to share the strategies that have really helped me change my mindset around writing. And while I am certain that there are still going to be many struggles along the road, I wanted to share some of the things that have worked for me in hopes that they might help you. One quick disclaimer, however, is that your writing process is a very personal endeavor and is most certainly not one size fits all. I'm going to share some of the strategies that have really helped as I've been working on my dissertation, which is an entirely different type of assignment, and the mindset shifts that I have implemented in order to help myself get unstuck when I'm experiencing writer's block. But I would also really love to hear your writing strategies in the comments below. If you have finished a PhD, if you have written a dissertation, if you have writing strategies that don't even apply to research, I would love to hear it. So please leave a comment down below of the writing strategies that have worked best for you. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight into the video. We're going to break this into 3 categories. First, we're going to talk a bit about mindset. Secondly, we're going to talk about my fail-proof outlining process. And third, the writing practice that I have implemented to improve my productivity as a researcher. This video is also in collaboration with Scrintal, which is a mind mapping application used in order to visualize your work and sort through your ideas. We are going to be implementing Scrintal in our outlining process, and so we're going to come back to them a little bit later on. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on into section 1, which is mindset for writing. When I first sat down to begin work on my dissertation last summer, I could not get past the feeling of insurmountable, immovable fear. Now, the advice that every single person gave me was to think about the dissertation in segments and to break that down into small chunks. It's not about writing the entire dissertation, it's about writing 5 articles. That in and of itself was helpful for about 30 seconds until I suddenly started thinking, but that still means I have to write 5 articles, and they also have to tie together. So the perfectionist spiral began. Then the advice was to write the individual sections. But again, the knowledge that this was going to turn into a 250-page document still was looming in the corner. Ultimately, I decided that that advice was not helpful to me. And so I began implementing a bit of a mindset shift in order to help me get past the idea that I need to write a 250-page document, and instead thinking about the project in a slightly different way. Tip number 1 actually came from my marketing training as an entrepreneur, and this was to change your audience. The first thing that you learn when you go into marketing or sales is to imagine your audience. And when I was writing up my dissertation, the only audience member that I could think of was my advisor. I had this image of them sitting in their office reading my dissertation and just sighing because they're disappointed with the work that I have submitted. And so I decided to change my audience. I personally love creating, drafting, ideating, scripting, filming YouTube videos. I feel like I can tell you almost anything. And by you, I mean the person that is actually watching this video and not my camera. But I do feel quite comfortable talking to my camera. And so I decided that I would begin discussing the process with my camera. And that is when the dissertation diaries was born. But beyond that, I also thought, what would happen if I actually began writing as though I were scripting a YouTube video? What if I wrote as though I was speaking to somebody different? And that immediately unlocked all of the fear and the perfectionist pausing that was leaving me stunted. And so mindset shift number 1 is to change your internal reader. Now on to mindset shift number 2. I personally disagree with the advice that you need to consider writing 5 pages per day. I think that it is perhaps a bit too high a goal unless it is a really deep focus writing day. We have a writing group at Accepted Society where 15, 20 of us will be on Zoom together in order to share what we're working on, and then we do an hour-and-a-half writing sprint. The people in that writing group tend to write about 500 to 1,000 words if that is their goal for the day. And when I had my mindset shift of thinking of a different reader for my writing, I also was able to write between 500 and 1,000 words in a session. And so I started thinking, what if we changed the mindset from I need to write X amount of words to I just need to sit down for a set amount of time. And all I need to do is dedicate to a 30 to 60 minute writing sprint. So let me break it down for you. If you were to sit down and you had a general understanding of what it is that you needed to write that day, and you were to write for about 30 minutes, you would on average produce between 250 and 500 words. Now there are going to be exceptions. There are days, for example, that in 30 minutes you can actually write more than that. And there are also days that you might actually write less. But if on average you were to write about 250 to 500 words in about a 30 to 60-minute writing sprint, and you were to multiply that by 5 days, you would have between 5 and 8 pages worth of text. A chapter for a dissertation amounts to about 30 to 50 pages. Now let's expand that math out even further. If you were to produce between 5 and 8 pages per week over 4 weeks of the month, you would have between 20 and 32 pages of written text, which basically amounts to a chapter. And so when I changed the goal from an amount of words or a number of pages and just turned it into a writing sprint per day, the math starts to add up and you do actually produce pages. So instead of thinking of the insurmountable page count, which is something that personally really messes with my head, and instead just thinking all I need to do is dedicate to a 45-minute writing sprint, I am willing to bet that it'll change your relationship to your writing. And if 45 minutes seems too insurmountable, that's also okay. You can just start with a post-it note or a bullet point, anything that just starts to put words on paper. And I know that that's not the advice that your advisor is going to give. It's not necessarily the advice that you're going to see everywhere online, but thinking about breaking it down into something that actually makes you produce words is at least a start. And the number one tip with all productivity, especially with procrastination, and for those that struggle with executive function, such as those with neurodiverse challenges to writing, but having something that just lowers the bar enough that it is not intimidating and that it allows you to get started, at least is a jumping off point. And the third mindset shift that I would like you to consider is, how can I make this more fun? I currently work for Ali Abdaal, who is the feel-good productivity guy here on YouTube. And one thing that I really took away from reading his book several months ago was, how is it that I can make the process of writing an enjoyable experience? Now, this can be going to a local coffee shop. This can be turning on a wonderful playlist. This can be joining a writing group like the one that we host at Accepted Society. For me, the thing that made the biggest difference in making the process fun is creating YouTube content out of it. The second thing that's helped me is actually doing it alongside somebody else. So whether that's in a writing group or it's a one-on-one Zoom or it's a co-working session at the library, having somebody that is also writing alongside me has made the most incredible difference to my productivity, because I know I'm not doing it alone. And so to summarize, the 3 mindset shifts I want you to think about are: 1, changing your internal reader; 2, lowering the bar; and 3, finding a way to make writing fun. And now we're going to move on to section number 2, which is my fail-proof outlining process. Everybody's writing process is a little bit different, and so is their outlining process. While in high school, we were taught to have an introduction with a thesis statement and to have a topic sentence at the beginning of your body paragraphs. This is going to be a little more freeform. And instead, I want to encourage you to think of visual ways in order to take your ideas and to sort them out kind of like you're working with a puzzle. And that is where Screental comes in. Screental is a visual mind mapping application for students, researchers, educators, anybody that needs to see their ideas in a visual way in order to begin organizing them. Now, this begins with a brain dump. So before you start reading, before you go into your data, I want you to go ahead and just go into Screental and begin just jotting down every single idea in your head. This can be themes, this can be subjects, this can be a general hypothesis about what you think you're going to find in your data. It can also be what you already know about the field. But I want you to just freeform it. You can just have a post-it note, or you can jot down all of your ideas in different cards, and then that's when you begin to organize them. Now, organizing can be done alongside the reading practice, or it can be done by just organizing all of your thoughts in these cards in a mind map. Now, here's the thing about mind maps. Your mind map is going to look like whatever works best for you. And this is where Screental is such a benefit, because you can truly customize it and make it your own. If you need to throw images in there, if you need to organize in different colors, Screental has everything you need in order to begin organizing your thoughts in a visual way. So step one is to brain dump, and then the second step is to mind map. As I begin mind mapping, I can begin to identify various themes. There are some themes that are going to make it into the dissertation and some that are not. But what I do with the different cards in my mind map is begin to transform them into the sections of my outline. Everyone's outline looks a little bit different. You can have this be really thorough, including quotes. It could be simple bullet points or even a timeline. But the goal here is to get your ideas out of your head, out in front of you, so that way you can begin physically organizing it in a virtual space and visualizing how it is that you would like to actually structure your writing. I find that this really helps get the ideas flowing, and also helps me feel that I am making progress towards my dissertation, because I'm organizing my thoughts in a way that allows me to get it out of my head and onto paper. Screental has so many incredible features in order for you to visualize your ideas, and if you would like to check it out for yourself, then go ahead and use the code Kaelyn10 in order to get a discount on your subscription. Thank you to Screental for being a long-term partner with me on my YouTube channel, and for being one of the most important tools in my writing process. And now, without further ado, we're going to go into section number 3, which is my writing practice. If I have learned anything from the countless productivity books that I have read and the neuroscience behind when we work best, it is that we all have a different time of day in which we are the best equipped to write. But the thing that I hadn't realized is that the time of day that I write best also changes with the seasons. And it also changes with the type of writing that I need to do. Back in January or so, I began waking up at 5 a.m. in order to do a writing sprint with my friend Kate. What I found was that I was rather productive first thing in the morning, but I was actually better equipped to read than I was to write. And when I was beginning to work to submit my dissertation, I found that the best, most focused hours on writing happened late at night. I don't think there's any mistaking in this. There are many artists and creatives who find inspiration at night. This is when things are the most quiet. It allows us to really tap into our writing, knowing that daybreak is not going to disrupt our flow. And so I have begun really thinking about my writing practice as something that also changes along with the seasons. So whether you are an early bird, a night owl, or something in between, I want you to take note of your patterns and think about when it is that you focus best, and also when it is that you actually write best. Because while they often overlap, it's not always the case. Run a little experiment. See what time of day you write best. When do you stay the most focused? And when perhaps do you need a helping hand in order to stay focused on your writing? Is that changing location? Is that studying with somebody else? I want you to really consider the conditions in which you work best, because this has been a game changer for my own writing process. The second game changer in my writing process was actually beginning to write before I've even read. I am such a perfectionist, and I'm a perfectionist in the most ineffective way. It is what keeps me from submitting. It is what keeps me from making progress, and I'm kind of sick of it. I want to be making progress on my dissertation. And one of the reasons that I am not making progress is because I allow the ideas of all of the other historians in my field to cloud my judgment. We so often, when writing papers, begin with reading in order to inform our ideas, without considering the fact that it might actually be shaping them. And so the piece of advice that I gave myself and has been transformative for my writing process is not to read first. It's to take my hypotheses and really stretch them out and write them down before I ever interact with the ideas of others. And this brings me to point number 3, which is to go to the source. Go straight to the evidence, go straight to your data, and begin describing it first. Oftentimes, the secondary literature is analyzing very similar data or evidence, and in my case, looking at very similar documents and archives. But you want to draw your own conclusions first, and then connect that to the work of others. There are some people that I'm sure are not going to agree with this, but I have found that especially at this stage in my writing and in my research, the dissertation is meant to be original. It's meant to be your own ideas and a unique perspective on the subject matter. And in my area of history, there are countless historians who have looked at very similar documents for generations. And when I began looking at them, I saw something slightly different. But as I've begun working on the dissertation, I've often gone back to them as a reference point, only to find that I don't know how to articulate my own ideas, because I feel like there's this weight, this chirping at the back of my head of wanting to ensure that I am citing everyone perfectly and that I am putting my ideas into context with other authors. And for my writing process, the thing that has been the most helpful is starting with my ideas and then making the connections later. The 4th writing practice that I've implemented that has made the biggest difference is talking out loud about my research. When I began working on my dissertation, I used to not talk to my partner or basically anybody about the research I was doing. I would talk a bit about it on YouTube, but I found that I wasn't actually having conversations with people in my day-to-day life about my research. Over the last couple of months, I have been asked by people in my life how my research is going and what it is that I'm working on. Instead of being worried that they wouldn't find it interesting or that they wouldn't understand, I decided that I would actually take it as an opportunity to begin finding how I can articulate my ideas to someone who doesn't actually know anything about the subject. Because when you're speaking with your advisor or somebody else in your field, you often feel the need to guard the way that you speak about the subject and the way that you articulate your ideas, because you want to make sure that you sound informed and that you're also citing the proper people and that your ideas are going to be well articulated. But when you're speaking to somebody that knows nothing about your subject, you have the opportunity to really reframe the way that you speak and think about the subject. And so instead of holding your dissertation close to your chest, I want you to speak openly about it. I want you to think about your dissertation and your research as something that is really important to you and that you can speak to people in your life about. When I began breaking down that barrier and started talking to everyone in my life about my dissertation, that's when the real change came. And I finally found that I was able to write. And then the 5th practice I've spoken a little bit about already, which is that I began thinking about my dissertation like a YouTube video. Instead of thinking about the individual chapter as something that needed to be structured like an article or that it needed to flow perfectly into the next chapter, I began instead writing as though it was a YouTube script. And the reason that this made the biggest difference was not because of the medium of YouTube or that I'm a YouTuber to begin with, but because I actually started writing in the way that I speak. I think so often we begin our drafts thinking about the theory and thinking about how it is that we sound informed, put ourselves in the best light possible. But sometimes this academic language is what is actually stopping us from writing. I went back to my undergraduate writings and found that the speech was much more natural. But as you become professionalized as a humanities scholar and you go further into your education, you often begin developing that colloquialism, the academic language that informs much of what it is that we read. But taking a little bit of a shift and thinking instead about writing how it is that I speak has actually allowed the words to come a lot more easily. And so while you can make edits to this later in order to make it sound proper for your advisor and for your committee, the one practice that I recommend that we all give a try is actually writing in our own voice. We have now reached the end of my video on my outlining and writing process as a PhD student. And if you enjoyed and made it to the end of this video, then I would love if you'd stick around and hit the subscribe button. And please comment down below if you have any writing strategies or tips, mindset shifts that you think others would benefit from and that have been helpful for you. I'd love to read them, and I can't wait to see your comments. I hope that you enjoyed this video and got something from it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye, friends.